Hello and welcome to this episode of Gaming. Inspired by Cyberpunk 2077, we're talking about character backstories, and specifically we're talking about those games that offer you a choice as to how your background impacts the game. Does it increase immersion? Is it more interesting? Do you feel closer to the character by having this kind of decision to make before you even begin to play? Or, alternatively, does it negatively influence proceedings by making you feel like you're missing out on what the options you decide to bypass have to offer? As ever, I'm joined by Stace Harman, and we begin by looking at the options Cyberpunk gives you before we even step foot into its world.
Cyberpunk 2077 is now finally out, finally with us, and one of the first big decisions that you have to make on that is the life path decision. Do you already know which life path you're going to be choosing, and if you do, why?
I don't know 100%, no. I know which, so there are three: Nomad, Street Kid, and Corpo. Corpo being a corporate one, the other two being kind of more self-explanatory. I'm pretty sure I'm 100% sure, I guess. Yeah, let's make the decision now. I'm 100% sure I'm not going to go with Nomad. Mm-hmm. Which to my understanding are, peoples who live outside of the city walls and they kind of travel from place to place. They're experts in cars and survival, I guess.
So what is it that immediately puts you off that, having just read what you've read about it and seen the videos you've seen? What is it like? Why can you almost immediately rule that one out, or 100% rule that one out?
Well, I mean, I'm quite a big fan of like cyberpunk kind of stuff. I mean, like most people, like Ghost in the Shell and Blade Runner being like probably the two sort of biggest, most influential examples of the genre on me. And Nomad is not what I consider cyberpunk. Like cyberpunk for me is, it's in the city. It's either struggling to survive, which is kind of what Street Kid sounds like. And you black market this and black market that, and dodgy sort of implants being put into you, and trying to do what you can to take money from the people on top of you. Mm-hmm. And then it's those people on top, which are like the corporate people, the kind of, I don't know, futuristic yuppies, I suppose, that are like controlling the world and taking what they can get for themselves in an environment that's just as hard as like the Street Kids environment, but in like a very different rich person way. But
it's like it seems like the corporate stuff is you're looking at the world from the top down, and the Street Kid is you're looking at the world from the bottom up, whereas the Nomad is like literally an outsider.
Yeah,
basically.
Nomad is like looking at that with an outside eye, but for me, that's not what cyberpunk is. Like cyberpunk is a genre. It's like being in there, not being able to escape this kind of almost feeling of, well, all this fantastic futuristic stuff is happening. It's like really claustrophobic because of the mechanization, because of the computerization, because of the AI control of so many aspects of your life. And if you're a nomad, it's almost like you're able to like sidestep a lot of that, which doesn't really appealed to me that much.
It did, and I'm the same certainly on the Nomad side, but then I did think, well, I guess the Nomads are the outsiders in the same way to an extent that the player is, and so the Nomad could be considered like the player's view into this outside world. And so that's like, that could work. I can see how that. I mean, it doesn't really appeal to me either, for very much the same reasons as it doesn't to you. But it's just not.
It might be one of those ones to play afterwards, maybe once you've played through the whole game, or at least, I don't know, the start of the game, whatever.
It's also the different abilities though as well, that because there are abilities or perks at least tied to each of these life paths, right? And the Nomad one being like cars, and it's like that doesn't really appeal to me either. It's like it's that. So even if it's not like they've even got all the cool stuff, or what I consider to be the cool stuff. So it's just like I can quite easily take it. And I know cars are a big part of this game, or can be. So, but yeah, it just doesn't really float.
Yeah, I haven't really looked into what skills are associated with which pathway, life paths they call them, don't they? I've only really looked at them from a narrative angle. I tend to try to do that. Like in all games that give you like kind of backstory or origins options or whatever. I tend to try to focus only on the narrative implications rather than the gameplay ones. And I don't know if that's the better or worse way of doing it, but I always kind of, I guess I like the narrative to inform the gameplay and my gameplay decisions, I suppose, rather than the other way around. Not that it can't be done the other way around, but on a big sprawling game like this, that I'm like Cyberpunk, that I'm probably going to be spending a very long time in, I'm going to want, I think, from before having played it, I think I'm going to want to be drawn through primarily through the narrative, by the narrative rather than by game mechanics. That might be a bit naive for a game of this length, but
yeah, I mean, I guess the assumption would be, and I guess you have to trust that CD Projekt are incorporating that in, that no, even if you chose Nomad, it's not going to be like, oh, you're not really seeing the real Cyberpunk story, because that will just be written into it. And I think, you're going to largely experience a lot of the same stuff. You just might experience it in a different way if you're a Nomad, perhaps. But I like the way that they've done it, though. I like that. So sometimes on character creation, backstory stuff, it can be. I suppose, what am I trying to say? I like that they are making it actual fully character setting, allies like base. Like, this is where you're going to start your story in this game. I like the fact that they're doing it as a proper backstory rather than as a choice of your personality. Because it's like I can be a street kid. Yeah, I can be a street kid or a corpo or nomad, but it sounds like I can still have any personality I want. So I'm getting to define just a foundation upon which I make decisions, rather than, I think, if you define a personality up front, then you're kind of having to decide what decisions you're going to make up front blind, without even knowing anything about this feels more like
to come.
Making the decision about, potentially, if any decision is being made here, it's how the world is going to react to you, and when you go into any given situation, how you are likely to be perceived. And of course, all three life paths are going to have situations where it's advantageous or more narratively satisfying to be one versus the other. But like, that is because I think even like the main NPC is still there. He's just going to react to you, or him in a different way, or he's going to react to you in a different way. So yeah, it is less about deciding how you're going to play, I guess, and more about deciding or accepting that the world's going to react to you in a different way depending on whether you grew up in the city or not.
Because Mass Effect is a good example of how I don't really like the way that they do it, because they do kind of force you to choose a personality while they give you the pre-service history options that you choose as part of your whatever you want your shepherds to be. And it's kind of written as though like you're choosing a backstory, like, what were you doing before this moment? But really what it's doing is it's defining which dialogue choices you get, and whether you want to be like the goodie or the baddie. Do you want to be the paragon or the renegade? And I don't like that, because you're already saying, okay, well, I want to choose this pre-service history, which gives me paragon bonus points, or this one which gives me renegade bonus points, whatever. So then from that point forward, if you want to kind of play the game quote unquote properly and like see the things that the developers think you're going to want to see, or think that you should see, depending on the choices that the Paragon or Renegade choice you've made at the start, then you're kind of locked into that from that point on now. And then like sort of deviating from that kind of makes you fearful that like, oh, now I'm just kind of watering down what I'm going to see, and I'm just going to get a little bit of both rather than a full solid meal of either of them. And that can kind of destroy the whole concept of defining a backstory for me. That's not fun at all.
Yeah. So what of the so that leaves Street Kid and Corpo for Cyberpunk if Nomad's kind of ruled out. Which of those is the most appealing?
I don't know. This is really tough, and this is probably going to be, I'm going to be sitting there. I'm going to be the game's going to be on. The controller's going to be on the table, on the coffee table, and then I'm just going to be. I'll probably have to get up and like make a drink and decide about it. I'll probably have to like have a shower, go for a walk, and just like think about it for ages, and then probably just end up picking one at random, or like rolling a dice, flipping a coin or something. I really don't know. Like, as I say, I'm very interested in both. Like Street Kid and the Corpo, as I said, like they're kind of two sides of the same coin. You're still like really deep in the city's workings and inner turmoils and whatever. Your life could kind of go either way, or I can see how your life could go for better or worse in those sort of vague frameworks. So I don't know. Like I think I'm slightly leaning more towards Street Kid, because I do kind of, like, to take the Blade Runner example, I guess I'd rather want to spend more time in this sort of down and dirty environments that Deckard is in, when he's like going for his crummy meals and whatever, rather than the ones where he's the fancy and cozy, where he's going to see the head guy. Yeah,
sort of ivory tower style, everything's very clinical. I understand that, yeah.
So, and I like the juxtaposition that cyberpunk worlds have, and hopefully this one does it well. It looks like it does. In that, at street level, you've got like the most high-tech thing next to just this ramshackle, really crappy, like hastily put together, cobbled together out of different random elements, like sort of, shanty towns, basically.
Yeah, and you've got those like huge holographic, typical, stereotypically huge holographic billboards advertising a better life and all that above what is effectively like a backstreet hack shop for getting cyber implants put in or taken out or changed, and it's all done. It's all very shady and it's illegal and it's just botched and all the rest of it.
And I like the politics and the kind of consumerism kind of commentary around that. So you've got these horrible living conditions. And then, you've got billboards promising you a better life. If you only spend this amount of money and you'll be promised this better life or whatever. It's just like, classic like consumerism stuff. Buy this car and everyone's going to love you and all the girls are going to want you and you get promotion or whatever. But really it's just about just continuing to take your money, and you're making money for someone else. You're not really making, you're not really improving your own stake in life. You're improving someone else's by indulging in the offers on those billboards. I like that kind of angle to it. So it's still going to be a tough choice, and that's still not 100%, but maybe slightly.
And it'll be interesting either way, because I'm leaning more towards the corporate, because for very similar reasons. Like that for me is kind of what Cyberpunk. That's what I most closely relate to a cyberpunk experience, not just in terms of the game, but in terms of the genre, that I want to have. That kind of like, I played a tabletop game, Netrunner, which was like that, and that was very much effectively the corpo versus the street kid, because it was like, it was street kids trying to infiltrate through neural networks, trying to infiltrate corporations. And find out their secrets and all of the rest of it. And playing on either of those sides was interesting, and it was asymmetrical. So it was done in a very interesting way. It wasn't just you had the same experience, but the thematic, like dressing, was different. But the corporation side is the side that most appeals. So if you were to play Street Kid, like immediately there is of course a difference there to talk about. But if you played corporate as well, it would be interesting to see how different the stories are, because of course it's not just about a backstory. It's about how you role play it, how you level your character, the kind of things you're interested in, the kind of play style you want to pursue. So there's interest either way.
I think that's actually that's arguably the more interesting question isn't how different a game is going to be, whether you be Nomad, Street Kid or Corpo, like, because you can pretty much be certain that at least at the start, the game's going to be very different. But I suppose the real interest is, if 5 people play Corpo, then how different are those playthroughs by the end? Is it genuinely that you've got agency over the decisions you make, or does your decision of Corpo really define you in a very grand, great way?
From what I've seen, just briefly, because we'll all be experiencing this at this point by the time this goes out, but from what I've seen, I think there is a difference. There's a differentiation between if you start as one life path and finish as that same life path, or if you start as that one life path and then halfway through you change. You might decide you'll ally yourself with a particular faction or a particular side that means you actually get more in. You could start as Corpo and actually end up siding with the Nomads and kind of lean more into that story. But there will be differentiation between somebody who's done that versus somebody that started as Nomad and finished as Nomad effectively. So that's, how much and how different it will be, I don't know. But that's
But you don't actually make a decision that says now
I don't think
flipped
so.
to Nomad. Like it's not like a tick box in your
I don't think it's
character sheet.
Yeah, there's like be aware this will change your alignment effectively. I don't think there's that kind of. I don't think it's that explicit. But it might be because there have been games. It may be that halfway through you have 3 very explicit paths to do. It could just be a mission. Do you want to do it this way, or this way? And there have been games that did that. One of CD Projekt's own games, Witcher 2, did that with its like whole second act was different depending on whether you chose, I think, Vernon Roche or Eorveth, the elf. I think that's how you pronounce his name. And you saw a completely different side of or a different section of the game that you literally couldn't get to if you chose the other one. So it might be, and that was very obvious that you were making a choice. But that felt okay because you'd played for several hours at that point. Like you'd played through the whole first act. You'd had a chance to sort of steep in that world and kind of just work out how you felt about the politics, how you felt about certain characters and their goals before you got to make that decision rather than having to make it up front. So that,
and that seems fine. Well. Because that kind of just what I was saying I didn't like about Mass Effect. Like that's that kind of decision that you're talking about in The Witcher 2 is like a decision based on personality and like what you've done up to that point. It's not based on your backstory. So I think it's fine for a game after its first act to say, okay, now based on what you've seen, what are you going to decide here? It's silly. It would be silly, I believe, to have that kind of decision up front. It's like, right, you can either do this or this or this, A, B, or C, and A and B, if you choose C, are going to be locked out from you forever. And it's like, well, how am I supposed to make an informed decision about that? I don't even know what kind of character I'm going to be
exactly.
or whatever.
And I don't know any of the people in this world. I don't know how this world is, and I don't know how I'm going to react to it. So but I can see that it would appear to be. Like it would appear to give you more choice. It would appear to give you you can replay and you can go back and play it, again and again. But I'm like me personally, I'm not going to do that. I played Dragon Age Origins, which was a game that did that similar thing with a life path or an origin story. And there were 6 or 7 of them or something, and I just didn't ever. That is a long game. I was never going to go back and then experience the other ones. So you make a choice at the beginning, and that gives you a certain amount of exclusive content. But not too much because there's like so many different backstories that it can't be like hours upon hours of, a game if nobody's going to see all the other options available. I think very few, like the percentage of players who own a game like Dragon Age, or like The Witcher 2, and then go through and play the whole thing again in order to try to see every single piece of content that a developer has put into a game must be incredibly, incredibly small. An incredibly small percentage. And I think because games have this interactive element, it can often be seen as like, oh well, I must interact with everything in the game in order to like complete the game or see or experience the game in like the quote unquote best way. But it's not really the best way because you end up going through the game again and again and again in this really mechanical way just to see all of these different options. But the experience that you're getting when you're doing that is not true to any kind of design mantra that the game was designed under. And I think actually, I'm someone who just tends to believe that your first playthrough of something, like that's it. Like that in terms of like what the game, what you experience of the game, like that is your primary experience. That's not like the be all and end all, but that is like your primary experience of the game. Anything that you kind of go through after that is purely just like a kind of academic process to try to satisfy your curiosity about what might have been. But then I actually think that to see what might have been kind of ruins the
the initial experience to an extent. It takes away, it makes it feel smaller. It's like, oh, okay, yes, that was one of these 3 options I had or whatever. It makes it seem less magical. It makes it seem less of like a legend. Like
you see
just
more
turns
of
it
the
into
nuts
this
and bolts, don't you? Because you get to understand. If you don't do that, then you're just left to imagine what it could have been like if you even bother to think about it. But if you do it, you get to see quite specifically, oh, okay, well, that person died instead of living, or that person, I got even, or something even as derivative of I got this upgrade instead of that one, or I got this weapon instead of that one, or like because I did this, I went down this path instead of that one, and that does serve to boil it down to just a very mechanical decision.
And I also think it makes it, it makes it mechanical. It also makes it less kind of resembling of how humans interpret the world, I suppose, because to dream about or to think about or to, just kind of try to predict what might have happened. Like we do that with our own lives all the time. And and then the world seems bigger in a game if you think, oh, what might have happened? Because it might be like, you could think of like 1,000 things that might have happened. But then if you know that, oh, actually only 4 things were ever going to happen, it's like, well, now it's ruined a bit. Like the world now seems really small and mechanical, and like it takes away of the very notion of choices and different pathways opening up the world. If you know them all, it makes it seem really small.
And it also highlights that illusion of choice. I think I remember seeing it in something like, this was nothing to do with backstories, but I think Until Dawn did that, where it would have certain sections that were, you had to jump through hoops. I think there was a particular section where one of the main characters is running away in a towel.
Don't remember jumping through a hoop in that game.
Well, it was almost you were like literally jumping over obstacles, I think, and like trying to push down obstacles for the pursuer to get tripped over by. And then it basically just came down to one thing at the end that you either, if you zigged instead of zagging, you got caught, no matter what you'd done previously. So then if you see that, it's like, well, it just feels,
because all your prior decisions, if you're working towards, okay, I'm going to keep all these people alive, I'm going to make decisions based on keeping them alive, and you've made 8 decisions, but everything just rests on decision 9 anyway, it doesn't matter, then that's the kind of thing that just makes a game seem incredibly small.
So something that I think something that Dragon Age Origins did do very well was it, before it came out, EA launched a character creation tool. They effectively stripped out the character creation stuff from the beginning of the game and put that out as like almost a free demo and let you create. I think that's quite
an intelligent market.
I think it is, because a lot of like this life story stuff, some of it has a huge amount of marketing value to give people this notion of you can be this, you can be that, and going through that character creation process several times and then having a bunch of characters saved, any of which or all of which you can import into the game when it comes out, and then you feel much more informed about the decisions that you've made because you've looked at all the options, and you can just get going as well straight away. Is another thing. I thought that was a intelligent and clever or canny thing to do, and it's, I would have liked to have seen that same thing for Cyberpunk. I would have liked to have kind of dug into all of that stuff before actually playing the game.
It makes you dream about like what's going to, it makes what's to come seem really aspirational. It's like, oh wow, look at all this real depth, and I can be, you probably, there'll be people who on the Dragon Age tool would have made like classes in like every single, would have made characters in every single class or whatever, maybe multiple characters in every single class, and then decided, and then just like really thought hard about like what they want to be and what they want to how they want to play in that game. And then if you've got people thinking about the game in that depth before it even comes out, like they're definitely buying it at that point, aren't they? Like they're in.
Yeah, I don't imagine a lot of people that downloaded the character creation tool then didn't buy the game, or at least, they might have downloaded it but not used it. A lot of people that spent any amount of time in it, not because it was so amazing that it's like, oh god, I've got to get this game, but because if you're already downloading that and toying with those options, you're probably already on the hook to an extent to buy it. So but then there was a more recent game that potentially did it was kind of a best of both worlds with a backstory element and a authored story, and that was I believe this was one of your games of the generation, right? Divinity Original Sin 2.
Yeah, Divinity 2 was my Divinity Original Sin 2 Definitive Edition,
of course, yeah,
was the
half-assed edition.
Favorite game of PS4. The generation that ended this year, whatever you want to call that, PS4 generation, the Xbox One, whatever, the Nvidia 2080 generation, whatever.
If you're a PC,
that has brilliant character options, because I mean you can either choose to play as one of their pre-authored characters, or you can choose to play as a blank character. But I think the real great thing that one does, that Divinity does in that, is very early on you realize that because you have a party of multiple people rather than just playing as a single person, if you choose a characters, so I believe that playing the game with the backstories, with the authored characters, is the best way to play that game, because they're just so well written. And again, it's not like it's like what Cyberpunk seems to promise as well, is you're playing a backstory rather than a personality. So you've got a backstory, but you can make your personality of that character anything you want.
Yeah.
The Red Prince or Beast, the Red Prince can be really high and mighty and whatever, or he can be a bit more down to earth, or Beast can really care about his royal sort of connections, or he could just not, just be very dismissive of them, like whatever, but he's still got the connections. That's the important thing. It's up to you how you deal with those.
Yeah.
But they also interact with each other, those backstories, really nicely. So depending on what characters you've chosen, the different backstories will interact with each other in different ways, and can even conflict and undermine each other if you've got the right characters in your party. So it's the interesting thing about that isn't necessarily whether you choose to play as a backstory or not. It's how the different backstories, depending on your actions, interact with each other, and that can give a very different outcome at the end. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I thought it was the best game of the generation, because its complexity of narrative and that the way that it gives you that illusion of I really am having a huge impact here is just beyond any RPG, probably any game of, well, maybe not any game, but any RPG that I've played.
Yeah. And it was, I think it was that notion of you can play your way is obviously a much bandied around phrase, but this was, I think Divinity does it really well in that it isn't just you can play your way and we will accommodate that. It was that you can play your way and that will have some impact on not only your own story but potentially that of your other team members, because they might be trying to do things that are that run contrary to what you're trying to do. The fact that you're all trying to effectively, you're all in it for a single prize. You can't win it as a party. Like it's a thing that only one person can be, and it's okay, well, that's interesting from the off. There's conflict immediately.
Yeah, and that was really interesting because I played that game in multiplayer with two other people, so we didn't always agree on what decisions our individual characters were making. So that just adds another layer of sort of turmoil to, are you going to try to stay true to this character that you're role playing, or are you going to try to kind of just play it as a party of actual real people, not just a party of different AI, different digital characters, but actual different real people.
Yeah. And then there are plenty of games that don't have that option for backstory, or rather a choice of your origins or your backstory, but that you can still role play, to your heart's content. And one of those is one of CD Projekt's own games, the Witcher series, which we've mentioned already, but Witcher 3 specifically. You are Geralt. You are, that's a much more authored experience, certainly from a character perspective. But the type of Geralt that you are is up to you. You get to choose whether you're going to be, kind of quite a ruthless, always want a fee, always demand payment, always, it's always a contract, a contractual kind of transaction that you're executing, or whether you're going to be a witcher for the people and, kind of try and help somebody. And that's, you're given a certain amount of information about Geralt, and particularly if you've played the other two games as well, but you're left to decide how you're going to interpret that. And that can be as powerful, if not more powerful, I think, in its own right. It doesn't, just because there is a choice on what background you have, what life path you have, that doesn't equate immediately to that being a better thing. And that's what you were touching on earlier, wasn't it? Like the interactivity of games, there's this notion potentially, or a trap really, that it must be better if you get the choice. If you can put your own self into that and input your like decision, your binary, I want this one or this one, that must somehow be a better experience, which is not at all necessarily the case.
I think it's incredibly hard to have a meaningful character that isn't written for you up front. At least like sort of their vision of the world and what's brought them to that place that you start playing as them. At least anyway, that has to be typically for me, that has to be quite authored, because otherwise like the character doesn't really have a place in the world otherwise. And the designers are trying to make the character that you play, if you don't give them those elements, then the character that you play, the world has to be ready to react to them in all possible ways, which means the world can't react to any of the potential ways a player is going to act in the world in a very deep and meaningful way, because it's got to somehow encompass every possible action that the player could possibly make. So it's always going to seem a bit weak. And this happens in Skyrim, right? So in Skyrim just falls down immediately, like almost when you first 10 minutes of like any Elder Scrolls game, when you start your position in the world for me just immediately is just crushed by some ridiculous silly thing. Well, like, you know, you can choose, like, you'll be like a certain race in Skyrim, and you'll go to some really racist, horrible town, and that hates your race, but like they don't hate you. Like you're fine. Like you're just walking around like, hello, I'm going to the market now.
Ones. Yeah.
It's like, what? Like I've just been told by everyone. And upon entry, I was told, oh God, we're really racist here, basically. Yeah. And it's like, and then you're just walking around like everyone's your best mate. It's like, what is going on here? Like,
it will just be like so watch yourself because we've got our eye on you. It's like that. That's the extent of the prejudice that you experience. And even that is just lip service. Nothing actually happens. It's just like, and that's because the writers in the game haven't authored anything, and it's up to you to author your own journey. But then if the designers don't put written characters into the game or written areas in the game, like this town doesn't like this other people, if they don't have place to like firm definitives like that, then the world's going to seem really empty and like unreal or like fake. But then you're just sort of blank slate of a character, or with just these certain small elements that are defined, like race or gender or visuals or your appearance. Even those basic things can fall down immediately because the game won't want to kick you out of that city, and so you can't go there because they're scared. Knock off content. Because again, they're scared of players being annoyed that they can't see that thing because they've made this decision that they didn't know what the effect was going to be down the line. So you can't have it the best of both worlds. Like you can't have, we're going to allow the player to do anything they want and they can engage and make the world their own, but then. On the other hand, actually you made that decision, therefore you're locked out of that piece of content, because then that undermines your initial promise of being able to do whatever you want and go whatever you want and interact in whatever way you want. And so games like that very quickly just ruin themselves by promising that the lack of authorship over your character is going to give you maximum authorship over the character, but actually it doesn't, because the believability of the world can just be crushed immediately. I think that isn't, I don't know about you, but that wasn't how I ever experienced Skyrim, and I don't think Skyrim or any of the Elder Scrolls games are really trying to be character-driven narrative experiences, are they? Like, and you can a quick experiment on that point is, well, what is the story of Oblivion or of Skyrim? It's like I played Oblivion for over 100 hours. I didn't get anywhere near completing it. Skyrim, probably
there's
same.
Like dragons.
Dragons. There's a dragonborn. There's some shouts, and it's setting itself up as a massive sandbox that you can explore, but adding these character options on the front to make it look like it's important. Or I guess for those people that do want to go very critical path, maybe there's more relevance to whether you look like a cat or you're somebody from the north.
I suppose. Yeah, and I suppose those things just kind of stick out for me a lot because of what I was saying before, that I tend to, on big RPGs like of that sort, or like Cyberpunk sort, I tend to consume them and be most interested in them and do most thinking about them through the narrative level. And what are the messages in the game? What are the themes in the game? How are my interactions? How are the how are my interactions with characters and whatever, how are they influencing that, and how is that changing the messages and the themes in the game. And then so when I see things like that happening in Skyrim, it's like I'm not interested enough in the mechanics in and of themselves that it can kind of overcome that that breakup of the believability.
Yeah. So we're hoping then that Cyberpunk, and we're going to be finding out very soon, but we're hoping then that Cyberpunk 2077 is going to make the most of its life path stuff. It isn't just going to be lip service. It isn't just going to be well, you pick this and that means you're good at X, Y, and Z, and you've got this friend instead of this friend. Well, I'm hoping at least that it's going to be like it's something that's threaded throughout the game and isn't just a one and done kind of thing. Like you get 2 hours of content at the beginning, and then that's the end of it. And it doesn't look like that's the case. And but there is an unknown for CD Projekt Red because they haven't done this before. They haven't made a game in this way before, so it's not as, they've got clearly a lot of caliber to fall back on, and they've proved themselves 10 times over, but they haven't done this kind of thing before, so that will be interesting. And I guess some of it is about, are they willing to make those tough decisions? Are they willing to lock you out? Are they willing to needle the player a little bit because of this decision you made? You can't come into this bar, or you can't come in, of course you can't as a nomad or as a corporate bod, you can't walk into this like super niche backstreet, dive bar, because you'll just stick out like a sore thumb. You're immediately going to be noticed. Well,
it'll be interesting to come back in however long when we've played for a good chunk of it, and see if it does meet those, answer any of these questions.
Okay, so to wrap up then, that's a quick, I think I am almost certainly going corporate. For the record, I'm almost certainly going corporate. You are almost certainly going, which of those two are you going to?
Yeah, Street Kid probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll see if we actually stick to that, or if when faced with all the options, once we boot the game up, we decide a different thing, go completely left field and go nomad after all.
Well, there you have it. Character backstories. I think that sets us up quite nicely to begin properly playing Cyberpunk 2077. Come tell us what you think about backstories and how having influence over them can impact your experience, for better or for worse. On Twitter, we're at Indie by Design. We're also at Indie by Design on Facebook and on Instagram, so do come by and say hello to us there too. If you're interested in the backstory of Double Fine Productions and the backstories to all of their games, from Psychonauts and Psychonauts 2 to Brutal Legend, Broken Age, Grim Fandango Remastered, then you should definitely go and check out 20 Double Fine Years, our big, glorious book of all things Double Fine. So you need to head over to doublefinebook.com, that's doublefinebook.com, to get your copy. Cheers for joining us, and we'll see you again next week.